I'm of counsel to the New Jersey law firm of Giordano, Halleran, and Ciesla. GHC is a multi-specialty firm that provides comprehensive and sophisticated legal services to companies and individuals. We work with organizations in a wide range of industries and one of the things we're expert at is providing advice and counsel on mergers and acquisitions and financing. My career before GHC has two halves. The first half was in the government in New York City and New York State, including 10 years as a prosecutor in Brooklyn. And the second half was as a corporate compliance professional. I served both as a chief compliance officer and as a compliance consultant. The level of scrutiny that compliance issues face in deal diligence. Legal and compliance issues have always been a part of the checklist in diligence. Do you have a code of ethics? Have you had any fines or penalties? But because of the issues that we've already talked about, the risks and the costs to companies from non-compliance, the level of scrutiny behind that checklist has increased tremendously in recent years. Companies want to find out if the compliance program in an organization that they're thinking of doing business with or thinking of acquiring, thinking of investing in, is real or simply a compliance program on paper. Compliance readiness or unreadiness can make a difference in the impact and the cost to both the company being acquired and the investors and the acquirers. One way to look at this is to sort of think about it this way. The first is, what are the principal laws and regulations that apply to this company based on what industry it's in, what markets it's in, how it does business, where it does business, who its regulators are, what its products are? What are the mission critical rules that we as an organization have to follow? The second is, what are we doing to understand and comply with those rules? What's our process for understanding those mission critical rules and complying with them? And the third thing is, how do we know whether our compliance is working? How do we know how well we're doing at complying with those mission critical rules? And the fourth, and this is where compliance gets at the heart of another fundamental question that we talked about a little bit earlier, and that is, do we mean what we say? When we say we protect your personal information, how do we know that that's what we're doing? When we say that we're going to treat you fairly as a customer, how do we know that that's what's happening? When we say we have good governance as part of ESG, how do we know and what's the proof? Whatever compliance program you have, change management and communication have to be a part of it. Leaders have to help their organizations understand that just like financial risks and operational risks, compliance risk is an important part of our future going forward. They have to make their employees understand why that is and what the potential challenges and cost to the company can be from not managing compliance risks effectively. They have to help the employees understand that at the end of the day, compliance readiness, just like getting our finances in order and getting our operations in order and getting our customers lined up, compliance readiness is about minimizing risk and maximizing value. And it's got to be part of the package because of all the things we've just been talking about, which is the failure to do that can have business, legal, financial, and reputational consequences. Compliance readiness. Are we ready for the increased scrutiny that's going to come through the deal process and after the deal? And are we ready for that bigger stage, whether it be acquisition, whether it be a public company? Is our compliance ready for that? And one way to answer that question is to take a look at it. To look at it sort of think about it this way, is maybe we need a compliance checkup. A compliance checkup that'll tell us this is where we are, this is where we need to be based on the kind of company we are, the industry we're in, where we want to go, how we want to grow, are we going to be public or not? This is what it's going to take to get there, and here's our plan for doing that. And that compliance checkup can help address compliance readiness before the deal, during diligence, and get the company ready for the big stage. And the other thing I'll add to that is, how are we going to document what we're doing and how we're going to get there and all the progress that we're going to make? And to the point you just asked about change management, how are we going to communicate this to our organization throughout the entire process? Well, ideally, companies have been thinking about it to one degree or another all along. Because as we've already talked about, every company has regulations to follow. Every company has a compliance risk profile, has some aspect of compliance that they have to deal with. So hopefully they've been thinking about it somewhere well before deal or exit prep. But because of the increased scrutiny and the increased risks that can come from the deal, as they're getting ready, as they're thinking about it, they should be thinking about compliance readiness, again, just as they want to get their organization together, they want to get their finances and operation together. Compliance should be an integral part of that whole process, and not just something that comes off to the side or at the last minute. The first piece of advice is that every company has to do this in its own framework, in its own way, based on the size and the industry and the nature of the company. Not every company has to think they need the same compliance program that JP Morgan Chase has, for example. So I think one of the reasons why it seems so daunting is that compliance can seem like this is going to cost us a lot of money, take a lot of time, distract us from what we really want to do, and involve an army of people. And you can get past that by focusing on three things that we talked about as part of this tailored, practical compliance checkup scaled to the company and its risks. One, current state assessment. This is our compliance risk profile. This is where we are, and this is what we're doing about that compliance risk profile. The second step, the target state. This is where we need to be, where we want to be, based on the future of our organization. And the third step is the roadmap. This is how we're going to get from point A to point B. And the important thing about getting help from an experienced compliance professional is they can help make that roadmap, to the point you're just asking about, shorter and less complicated. And they can do that in three ways. The first is, let's focus on the really important risks. We don't need to solve every potential compliance issue. Let's focus on the things that are most important. What I was talking about before, the mission critical rules that apply to this organization. The second thing is, a lot of companies have a lot of compliance already, even if they don't call it compliance, whether it be policies and procedures in HR, policies and procedures in finance, communications from their board and their leaders. An experienced compliance professional in this checkup process can identify all those pieces. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just have to figure out how to bring them together, make them work together in the best way they can, and identify and address any gaps. And the third thing is what we've already been talking about, and that is effective change management. This is why we're doing it. This is how it works for us. And this is the payoff at the end of that process. That is a terrific question. And that gets to what will be and is already starting to be the future of compliance. And that is How can compliance professionals and the companies they work for leverage technology to not only make compliance better, but also more efficient, less expensive, and less intrusive? And for purposes of this conversation, I think the way to look at technology is to look at technology in the context of data. And compliance programs need data. And there's three ways that I think we can look at it. The first is this. When I was a compliance officer dealing with regulators, we were invariably told, if it's not documented, it didn't happen. We could talk to the regulators all we wanted about our terrific compliance program, but they wanted to see the evidence. So the first place that technology can help is to do that, is to allow us to capture and produce the evidence needed to demonstrate compliance readiness. Documentation, not only about the existence of a compliance program, but how effective it is. So that's the first. The second, and it's related to that first, is that even when we had this documentation, we would often struggle to find it all, bring it all together, and package it and produce it in a way that was the most persuasive and relevant to what the regulators needed. Let me give you an example. We would get asked by state insurance regulators, when I was a compliance officer in the insurance industry, to produce 100 files about our treatment of customer J. Cohen. It could take us hours to do that because so many different parts of the organization had touched J. Cohen in the course of the relationship between company and customer. And it wasn't all sitting in one place. So technology can help us bring together all the things that we need in order to demonstrate compliance readiness, all the documentation we just talked about, and present it in a way that is most persuasive. And then the third thing is even more basic than that. Technology can help us build and implement the right data repository so that we can have that critical information ready and available whenever it's needed. Well, it's interesting because the questions are somewhat related to the questions we were just talking about in terms of a legal vendor. And as I mentioned before, these are questions that companies are increasingly asking because of the growing importance of and opportunity of technology. So how much experience do they have in the specific tasks that we need them for? Do they understand our industry, our issues, and our processes? Are they fit for purpose? Does the technology directly address what we need it to do, or are they going to try to squeeze it or retrofit it? How easy or hard is it to install, apply, and use? A few years ago, when new compliance technologies started to emerge, a lot of companies went out and bought the technology and then found that it was extremely difficult to actually install and use. And they wound up either deciding not to use it or hiring consultants to help them implement the technology that they'd already acquired, just adding to the time and expense. So how easy or hard is this for us to use? Is it adaptable and scalable to us? We've talked a lot about adaptability and scalability, and just as it is for the outside expert, it's important for the technology also. Customer service. Things always happen. What kind of service will we have? And then obviously, just as it is with an outside expert, what's the cost compared to the options? When it comes to technology that addresses the specific issues we're talking about, data and analytics, there are two other specific things that companies ought to think about. One you mentioned a minute ago, and that is security. If there's going to be sensitive, personal, and company information in this database, how secure will it be? That is a huge issue. And the second, and this gets back to something we were talking about a couple of minutes ago, can we shape the production? Can the technology help us find and produce what we need to and protect and secure what we don't need to produce so that we can manage our risks in the course of the process? So all those things we talked about apply in general, but with regard to specifically data and analytics, how secure is it and how effective will it be in producing what we need and protecting and not producing what we don't need?